When I was in university, maybe, yeah, first year, maybe, we finally moved out of a townhouse that we lived in since I was grade six. And, I just didn't know any life outside of an apartment living in a townhouse, like, like high density living, but to live it was a semi-detached house, but what was really cool about moving out of the townhouse into this house was that it was brand new. We made the measurements, and we had some say in terms of customization and how big the room is going to be. So I ended up getting a tiny little room on the main floor because my mom wanted a walk-in closet. So, but still, it was just really nice, just fresh house, and you get to visit it as the construction goes on, and you get to make changes and pick tiles and things like that. So that was kind of interesting, and never went through anything like that because, as I said, we lived in a townhome. And one of the interesting things, I guess the general contractor said at the end, and after the house was completed and we're about to move in, and he was walking us through the house and explaining this and that, and we were inspecting the house, and he said, because this is a brand new house, the house needs to settle over a period of next 6 months or a year, whatever it is. And you will hear a lot of disturbing and alarming sounds because this house is literally settling into the pillars and foundations. So you will hear creaks and loud noises, and it says, don't call me because that's all part of the game. It's just natural that house will make that sound. Actually, after he has told us that, we have never heard any sound except for one day, about 5 months later, I thought the house was going to collapse because there was a loud, like, crack of a sound. And after that, we never heard anything again. And that's because I guess maybe the part of the roof, because that's where the sound was coming from, was joined together, like nailed together. And the strength of the roof was from being joining here at the edge. And as the strength of the nail was giving its way to the gravity, the roof kind of, I guess, literally in some way collapsed into the pillars that was attached to the foundation. So now a house is leaning not on itself, not on the nails and the joineries, but it is leaning on the pillars and the foundation. And that's how a house settles and actually becomes stronger as you live in it and as time passes. Israelites have journeyed through the desert in the wilderness for 40 years. And before that, they were living in Egypt. And as amazing as the experience of crossing the Red Sea was, they sinned many times, even though they've experienced God in no small way. They've experienced many miracles, many provisions, and many faithfulness. And yet still, they couldn't quite settle into the people that God wanted them to be. God wanted them to be a blessing, a nation of priests. God wanted them to return Israelites into the image that he has created them to be. But they were stubborn and they were stuck at the joinery, and they would not let go of their life and their ideas and their priorities and things that they wanted. So they were just glued together at the joinery, and they would not settle into the image of God, into the purpose that God has called them out to be, which is to bear his image and to be a blessing. But as they journey through the desert, little by little, they began to settle, and they began to crack at the joint, and they began to let go of the things that they really wanted, like go back to Egypt and eat vegetables. And they settled into the image of God, and they began to live as a blessing. And we begin to get a hint of that in last week's sermon that Pastor David preached, story of Rahab and how Joshua sent 2 spies into the promised land to scope out the land. And there they almost get caught by Canaanite soldiers. And they were hiding in Rahab's house, who was a Canaanite woman, a prostitute woman. And there, because of Rahab has hidden the spies, Rahab asked for a favor, doesn't she? She says, because I've done this for you, and because I know that God is coming to this land, and the land will be yours, because we have heard what God has done for you. When you come and take this land, I want you to protect me, my father, and my mother, brothers and sisters. And the 2 spies, they say, we will do that if you put this scarlet cloth on your window, and if everybody remains in your house. These 2 things are necessary. If anybody's on the outside of the house during the attack and they die, the blood is not upon us. We're not responsible. You are. And as Pastor David has noted, this is reminiscent of Passover, where God instructed Israelites to put the blood of lamb on the doorpost. And as long as you remain in the house, the entire household is saved. What I find fascinating here and really encouraging is that the 2 spies didn't say, if you put up a sign, a neon sign that says, Rahab lives here, or any other color or any other means of saving them, but they're duplicating and they're replicating the salvation story that they have received from God. So they really do duplicate Passover. The Passover meal and the salvation that they have experienced and they have heard and that they have received from God, they're giving it to somebody else. Spies could have taken any other means, but they chose red scarlet because now they understand that they are to bear the image of God, and they're to duplicate what God has done for them for somebody else. They didn't let the gender get in the way of saving her, because Passover meal is above and greater than that, because as long as you remain in the house, you are saved. And no doubt some of the Egyptian people were in the house with Israelites during that meal. So ethnicity does not get in the way of salvation. They experienced that. Salvation does not stand in the way of gender, and salvation does not get in the way of occupation. What kind of employment you have. It is by faith and faith alone. And once they have experienced that, they begin to duplicate that, and they are starting to be a blessing to other people. We were saved, although we were just slaves, and we were nothing more than a slave. We're construction workers. We were shepherds. One of those, if you're a shepherd back in the day, it is considered a detestable job. So whatever they experienced from God, they're now duplicating and giving that as a gift. And today in our text that Jack has read for us, it is a story of Gibeonites, and we see once again how the image of God is being played out as a gift and blessing to other people. And that although they were sinning and they were stubborn and they have wandered in the desert for 40 years, over that time, little by little, there were creeks and there were opening of the joints where they're learning to settle into the foundation and leaning upon God himself to be a true blessing. Gibeonites were Canaanites. They lived in the land in the promised land that Israelites was going to take over. But Gibeonites knew, although they were a powerful tribe within Canaanite feudal system, they knew that they were going to be taken over, steamrolled by Israelites. So they lie to Israelites by coming to them first before Israelites cross over into the promised land. They put on dirty clothes, tattered clothes, old wineskin, and moldy bread, and dry bread, and all these things that seem to indicate that they came from a faraway land and they've been traveling for a long time. And they come to Israelites and say, we come from a faraway land, but we have heard about your fame and what God has done for you. So we want to make peace treaty with you. So Israelites, without consulting God, they say, okay, you seem like a good bunch of people. We'll make a peace treaty with you. We will protect you at all costs. But later on, and shortly after making that peace treaty and vow with them, Israelites find out that they were actually inhabitants of Canaan. Because of that peace treaty, 5 other tribes, 5 other prominent kings of land of Canaan, they form a coalition. They come as one and they say, we will teach Gibeonites a lesson. Because they did not form a coalition with us, they sided with our enemies. And these 5-king coalition are coming down to turn Gibeonites into a dust and ransack them and get rid of them. And in this time, Gibeonites send a messenger to Joshua saying, don't relax your hand. In other words, you have commitment to us. You have made a promise and a covenant with us. Although we lied to you and we deceived you, and that's how you made a promise and covenant and contract. But you said you would protect us. You said that you are on our side. Therefore, you must come to our rescue. Israelites could have easily taken this opportunity as kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Gibeonites, well, we can turn our backs against you, and the coalition and you and your mighty men will fight, and no doubt the 2 forces will be weakened. You're doing our job for us. Why should we come and help you? You have lied to us. This covenant doesn't count. They didn't say that because when Gibeonites cried out to them, it was the similar prayer that Israelites have prayed in land of Egypt. They cried out to the Lord, and Lord came to their rescue. And they could not break that covenant with them because that is the God that they have experienced in the land of slavery and all throughout the journey through the desert. So instead of turning their backs, they come and they rescue them. And rescue they do. The covenant of commitment, not turning their backs, just in the same way that God has not turned their back on them. They're living that out, and they're becoming a blessing even to Canaanites. Notice that they're becoming blessing not to another tribe of Israel, not to another family within their clan or tribe, but they're being a blessing to people that they were supposed to fight and get rid of. All because little by little, God has been removing their attachment to Egypt, to vegetable, to meat, and to their old slave mentality and their old priorities of getting their belly full. And this is a big deal, guys, because remember, Israelites betrayed Moses several times, and they say they try to kill Moses. So for them to remain faithful to a Canaanite when they struggle to be faithful to Moses is a big deal. That they're really becoming people who resembles God, who are becoming a priestly nation, and to bless those people around them. I want to talk about the miracle aspect, which is found in this text, but I don't think I can get into that. And if you want to know more about that, let me do a little plug-in and say, come to Life Devil on Monday and Wednesday, And I want to deal with that then and there. Some of the textual issues and scientific issues, and what does this all mean? But I want you to know here what we see here is that God is absolutely gracious to save people by faith, as in case of the Passover meal. That God was absolutely committed to Israelites in saving, in their act of saving, another group of Canaanites, in this case, Gibeonites. And they, Israelites, have become people that are replicating God, that is bearing the image of God. So I want to ask you today, has your journey with God, has all the experience that you had with God, making you replicate what he has done for you? Do you naturally do what you have received in the same way that a child would duplicate what he or she has been taught in their home? How to respond to unfairness, how to respond to greed, how to respond to violence, how to respond to difficulties and trials in life. In the same way, have you been journeying with God in a way that now you can duplicate his image and his resemblance? Don't you and I duplicate some of the family values? Oh, our house, we never did that. You know, it doesn't even have to be a positive thing. It can be a negative thing. We've always bought the best thing. We always went and splurged. And we always went over and we always luxuriated ourselves over clothing and the things that we have purchased and ate. Just like that, by journeying with God and by experiencing God in our life, we will, in a long, although there are many failures and sins, over a period of time, we will resemble him. We will resemble his faithfulness, his graciousness, way that he is committed to people, although they may not deserve it. That we're faithful people. We're people who is willing and able to turn the other cheek. We are people who can show love even to our enemies. In the case that Israelites have shown their faithfulness, how they turn the other cheek, and how they have loved their enemies, literally their enemies. So I want to share with you today, God has given all of us so much through Christ, who has saved us through faith, that if you remain in this house with blood of Christ on it, that if just by the fact that you remain in this house, through that faith, you are saved. So we're learning to be gracious people, that we want to exemplify who God is and how we have experienced God. And we want to share the gospel of Christ with our neighbors, not only through our words, not only through our testimony of how we have experienced God, but also through our actions. Is there Passover-like actions in our life? And how would you live out Passover in your own life? How would your life be more of a communion, this graciousness of God that is being lived out in your own life? Again, do you practice committed faithfulness to your brothers and sisters in the church and people in your life? Or do you write them off? Do you have standards? And once they step away from the boundary of what you think is a line that people should never cross, do you write them off? Or do you come to their rescue because God has come to your rescue, although your sin and your failures and your lack of faith, despite your lack of faith, God has come and rescued you over and over and over again. I pray that your journey with God is slowly settling you into the foundation. That you're not relying upon yourself and your patience and your graciousness and your willingness to be committed to people, but you're leaning and settling into the foundation. That your faith is becoming stronger and your acts and your testimony is become more marvelous so that your neighbors may know God, and that you're offering the gospel and you're offering the salvation message and salvation life, restore life to your neighbors so that they may also, your neighbors and your friends and your co-workers may turn to God through you.